Hey guys, what's up? We are back again, once again, with another video. Today we are doing our Big Ten West edition as we do all these conference previews slash predictions. We've already done the SEC, the ACC, Big Ten East. If you want to go ahead and check out the East version of this, but we are going to move on to the West Division. Lincoln, how are we doing? And who do you got as your number 17?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk some college football. As you see on the screen, help us hit that goal over here on Roundup of 50 subs. By the end of August, we'll have a bunch of just exclusive college football stuff over here on this channel for the season. So make sure you guys check that out for exclusive college football content all season long, as well as we're going to try and do a stream every week of the biggest games. So, and I'm sure for week one, we'll have a lot more than just one stream with big games on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So that'll be nice. But yeah, so I'll start us off at number 7. I have the Northwestern Wildcats. Their team won one game last season. I seen something online the other day. It's been over like 800 days since Northwestern once won a game on American soil because their win last year against Nebraska came in Ireland. This year, Notre Dame and Navy get that game. So that'll be a fun one to start off the season in week 0. But Northwestern's in a mess. They return 2 starters on offense, 5 starters on defense. They lose their head coach, Pat Fitzgerald, after some scandals and allegations probably a month ago at this point, month and a half ago. So it's not looking good for Northwestern heading into the season. I don't think there's much talent on this team. I don't really like what they bring back, and their schedule isn't very good either. I think they probably only beat Howard and maybe UTEP, and that's about it for them.
Yeah, I do think that Northwestern does get a win on U.S. soil this year, but I don't know how it's going to play out. As my number 7 team, I also have Northwestern with the firing of the firing of Pat Fitzgerald. I just don't see another team being as bad as Northwestern was and is going to be. They went 11-1 last year. They struggled all year long, losing to a lot of teams, even losing to an FCS Southern Illinois. And to be fair, Southern Illinois is not a bad team, but Northwestern should not be losing to Southern.
Especially as a Power 5 team in the second best, or the so-called second best conference.
Yeah, so-called, yeah. Illinois State beat them a couple of years prior. I think it was in 2016 or 17. So it's not like the Missouri Valley teams haven't ever beat Northwestern, but it still doesn't look good. Otherwise, the only player of note really on this roster, in my opinion, is Ben Bryant, the transfer from Cincinnati, or maybe Ryan Helinski. But I do think that Ben Bryant will be quarterback. So they'll probably have a good defense. They'll probably play some solid defense. They may even play well against a team like Penn State or an Illinois and just kind of screw with them because, well, they played Ohio State 21-7 last year, partially because there was like 50-mile-an-hour wind gust. But you never know. Northwestern's a scrappy team. I'm sure they'll continue to be a scrappy team, and I guess multiple different ways. But I think that it will be a tough season for the Wildcats. Lincoln, number 6.
At number 6, I have the Boilermakers of Purdue. Last year went 8-6, had a good season, but they lose a lot of the guys that were key to that, particularly Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. They lose their head coach as Jeff Brom is off to Louisville, and they don't really, they were really good. What was it, 2-3 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
They did win the division, I believe, last season. They won the division last season, got smacked by Michigan in the championship game. Not really a surprise there. But, Graham Harrell isn't a bad offensive coordinator. He's certainly far from a good one, but he's not a bad one. I think Purdue can be solid this season, win, 5, 6, 7 games, but I don't really see anything more than that, and I don't really like the way their schedule sets up either. They get all the tough teams at home, which some may say that's good to play Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio State at home, and Minnesota at home. But it's
Ohio State particularly.
What's that?
I said Ohio State particularly at home.
Yes, Ohio State particularly, but it's going to be difficult to go. As a if I was a coach, I would want my easier games in conference at home instead of getting the tough teams that it's going to be hard to beat regardless of where you play them at home, and then having to go to teams like Iowa, who isn't a great team. You could probably beat them at home, but going to Iowa is such a tough place to win. Going on the road to Nebraska, that's going to be a tough place to win. Even on the road to Northwestern, I still think Purdue probably wins that game, but it just adds difficulty to the game already.
Yeah, definitely. So at number 6, I know that a lot of you guys may disagree with me, but hear me out. I have Nebraska at number 6. Matt Rule is the new head coach at Nebraska. And let's be honest here. Matt Rule has had a track record of kind of struggling in that first year as a head coach. At Baylor, he went 1-11. And at Temple, I think it was 3-9, if I could remember correctly, in his first year. So that first year tends to be a struggle for him. And I'll be honest in saying this. I don't know if I fully trust Matt Rule to turn around Nebraska. I do kind of, but he's going to have to show me a little bit after kind of the debacle that happened in Carolina. And yes, it is true that success in the college ranks does not mean you're going to have success in the NFL and vice versa, because they're two different types of people. NFL guys, they're playing this as a profession, and college guys, they're students still. They're student athletes. So it is two different personalities. And with Nebraska, I think that this team, they have some pieces. They have Jeff Sims at quarterback, but you lose Trey Palmer. He was your best wide receiver by far, had 1,000 yards, and the next guy didn't even have 500. So the defense will have some solid pieces, but overall, I struggle to kind of see this team winning any more games than they already kind of do. And they get Purdue off Purdue's bye week. So I do kind of see that as kind of like an iffy game for Purdue. Plus, I personally like Ryan Weathers in his first season at Purdue more than I like Matt Rule in his first season. Long term, I'm taking Rule, but short term, I think I'll take Ryan.
I can see that for sure. My number 5 team, I have the Minnesota Golden Gophers. They don't return a whole lot, only 10 total starters, 5 on each side of the football. But they do bring back the quarterback who I would consider the starter over Tanner Morgan, a guy who, not really the starter. He didn't start last season, but I think he's the better quarterback. And Athen Cali,
the Greek gunslinger. The Greek gunslinger's his nickname. That's what we're going.
Yes. He's a very talented guy. Last season, 60 of 111 for 946 yards, 3 touchdowns to 4 picks. But I expect him to be better this season. I think he's a great athlete. I think he has a solid arm. The problem I see for Minnesota is the offensive line and the running backs. That is something that they've been able to count on a lot over the last few years, and they don't have that really coming into the season. Now, obviously, I'm not saying they can't have that, but coming into the season, they don't have that stability where all right, they have a 1,000-yard rusher in the backfield and they have a top 10 offensive line in the country. We just don't know that. Sean Tyler projected to be the starter. The leading rusher last season for him was Bryce Williams, or the leading returner for them was Bryce Williams, 51 carries, 249 yards. So they really don't have anybody that's really proven back there. But it's going to be interesting with Minnesota what they can do. There's been a lot of rumors. They kind of died off, but a few around the same time as Fitzgerald was fired, I think it was like a week after, there were rumors that PJ Fleck had reported was like there was a toxic culture and stuff being built there. And so, we'll see how that goes. And real quick, too, I want to look at, I think Minnesota has the weirdest matchup in the country. They are taking part in the weirdest game. When week 3, September 16th, Minnesota goes on the road to North Carolina.
Yep.
When did that game get scheduled and who the heck came up with that? Because I don't think I've ever – that is just the most – craziest matchup.
Random, yeah.
Yeah, just the most random game in college football. But I think it should be a pretty fun one. I think it will be. Minnesota 9-4 last season, so they're still having good seasons. Not like they did a few years ago when they lost like 1 or 2 games. But I think Minnesota will have a solid season. I just see them with a hard time in the Big Ten, particularly because they do have some tough games.
Yeah. So at number 5, I have the Boilermakers. I think that Purdue is just in a little bit better spot. Like I said, I did kind of talk about this earlier when I was talking about Nebraska, but I think with this team, Purdue, the biggest reason I think for a possible success when it comes to this season is that when you look at the quarterback position, you are bringing in Hudson Carr, and I do think that Hudson Carr brings in some experience that you may not get at other places. Hudson Carr was the starting quarterback for Texas for a little bit before Quinn Ewers took over the job. So he brings in a lot of experience, which is something that I don't think you could say about many quarterbacks coming in. But I think that Purdue, particularly when it comes to non-conference, they're going to have a tough time. You got a home game against Fresno State, road game against Virginia Tech, home game against Syracuse. That's your non-conference. That's a tough non-conference, but we're ranking the Big Ten West standings, and that's where it kind of plays in. You have a road game against Nebraska off a bye week, so I think that that's a winnable matchup. You have a road game against Northwestern. I think you can get a win there, and then you have a home game against Indiana. And if you can get 3 wins, I think that kind of locks you into that number 5 spot, or maybe you even switch it out with a road win against Iowa or a home win against either Wisconsin or Illinois, both in which you played well, and Illinois you upset last year.
Yeah, I could see that from Purdue. With my number 4 team, I have Iowa, the team with no offense. Let me flip to the stats page. I know Iowa's offense was awful last season, and I don't expect it to be much better. I'm not a big fan of McNamara. Iowa in offense last year, total offense 14th out of 14 in the Big Ten, 13 out of 14 in passing offense, 14 out of 14 in rushing offense, and 12 out of 14 in scoring offense. They averaged 17 points a game last season. That is not good at all. I don't really see those numbers improving. I don't like anybody on that offense. But defensively, on that side of the football, they are elite. They have potential to be a top 10 defense again this year. And I think in this division, in this conference, probably the only one that you could say this would be relevant for and would work in, I think Iowa can win 8 games and go, 4-5, 5-4 in the Big Ten with the defense that they have. You look at teams like Northwestern. If they can score 10 points on Northwestern, I think they win that game. I don't see Northwestern scoring more than 10 points on this defense. Maybe a team like Rutgers, if you can score, 2 touchdowns, I don't think they can score that. So even a team like Purdue, it's possible if you hold Purdue to 10 points that, you could win that football game. So I think McNamara is upgraded the position, but I don't think it's really any kind of move that's going to drastically change your points per game. I just don't think Iowa's an offensive team. They don't really have any playmakers. But what they do have is a very good offensive line in which they returned every single starter. So if they can get some good carries by Caleb Johnson, 151 carries, 779 yards, 6 touchdowns. If they can get him to 1,000 yards and 10 plus touchdowns, I think it's possible Iowa can win 8-9 games.
Yeah. So at number 4, I also agree with you on this pick. I do have the Hawkeyes. I think Iowa, it just simply comes down to this. This is a team that their conference score differential was 19-18. That was their average conference game score, 19-18. With just some games where, like games against South Dakota State, they won 7-3. And it wasn't that they scored a touchdown. It was that they scored 2 safeties and a field goal. So that is just how pathetic their offense was, is that they didn't score a touchdown until later on in their second game against Iowa State, and that's all they did. So I think that this team,
that was in the second half of that game too, towards the end.
Yeah. Yep. So Northwestern was the most points they scored, and they scored 33 in that game. After that, it's 27 against Rutgers and Nevada. I just don't see any offensive capabilities coming out of this team. And with the nepotism from the staff, if you don't know what I mean, Kirk Ferentz's son is the offensive coordinator. I think that they'll be solid. I don't think they'll be bad, but are they going to win games against Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois? I don't really see it.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them to score points to be able to beat some of these teams. But my number 3 team is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I'm a little higher on Matt Rule. You talked about, his failure at the Panthers, and yes, he did fail and fail pretty badly, but he found some good talent and he got good talent in the draft. That's one of the things I liked is the talent evaluation from him. And the second thing was the culture. All everybody talked about with Matt Rule was that he brought a winning culture. The culture was great there. I think that's exactly what Nebraska needs. I think he's a very good developer as well. So I think, you have a guy like Jeff Sims at quarterback who beat out Casey Thompson for the spot. I think Jeff Sims is one of the most underrated quarterbacks simply because I think he's one of the most raw talent at quarterback too, because he was at Georgia Tech, was not developed at all since he came out of high school. So if Nebraska can develop him and get him into a very good passer, they have some pieces to work with. Like you mentioned, the receivers aren't great. I'm not a huge fan of them. I do like Anthony Grant at running back. The defense returns 8 starters. So if Matt Rule can get some of those guys to buy in to his culture, I think that Nebraska can have a good season, especially in a weaker division.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. So at number 3 for me, I have the Golden Gophers. I think that Minnesota, they're in a good spot. And let's be honest here. For the last 2 seasons, they have gone 9-4 with a bowl win. PJ Fleck, if nothing else, can win bowl games. He is 4-0 in his bowl games with wins in 2018, 2019, 2021, and 2022. This is a guy that just simply does a good job at being able to win those games that he needs to. And I think when it comes down to this game, he's beaten Wisconsin the past 2 years. He kind of struggled to beat Wisconsin when he first got there, got a win in 2018, but definitely a big year for Minnesota. I think that they just I think they beat out Iowa. I think they're on that upper echelon, but I don't think that they beat out Wisconsin because I think that they have some issues that they need to deal with when it comes to running back and offensive line, like Lincoln talked about earlier, though I am a lot higher on them than Lincoln is.
Yep. So my number 2 team, I have the Illinois Fighting Illini. I think this is a team that goes 9-3, 10-2. I think they're going to be in a good spot. I do think that getting Wisconsin at home is huge for them. That's great because that's, in my opinion, going to be the game for the division, to be honest with you about it. You look at both Illinois and Wisconsin's schedule, and it is hard to find losses for them. It's just hard to, and not just in the conference, but just out of conference as well. It's hard to find losses. Like you look at Illinois' schedule, they're out of conference. They get Toledo and Florida Atlantic at home, and in week 2 they go on the road to Kansas. The only potential loss that you could say there is at Kansas, and to me that's a 50-50 game. Then you look, they get Penn State at home. They get Nebraska at home. They get Wisconsin at home. They do have to go on the road to Iowa, on the road to Minnesota, and on the road to Maryland. And that's about the only toughness in this schedule that they have. In a lot of their 2 biggest games, Penn State and Wisconsin, they get both of them at home, and they get Penn State early in week 3, which could be huge considering Penn State has a young quarterback starting for the first time in Drew Aller. So, I think Illinois is going to have a good season, but I do think that they will come in second place in this division.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Wisconsin in a second place position. My reasoning is that I think that Illinois has a little bit better stability when it comes to this division. And to be honest, I think if Illinois had not had a hiccup against Michigan State or against Purdue, this was a team that was very likely to go and play in the Big Ten championship game. And this is an Illinois team that almost upset Michigan last year. They were 2 points away. It was a 19-17 game, and they about hit a field goal. So this is an Illinois team that has a very real shot to be a very competitive team. And when it comes to Wisconsin, I think it's just going to take a little bit of transition time for Luke Fickell, just enough that road game on October 21st is going to be a loss. And if you lose to Illinois, I think that kind of sets you back because that means you need Illinois to lose an extra game in order for you to be able to get into the conference championship. And I just don't see it. I think Wisconsin loses that game at Illinois. So I think that the winner of that matchup is going to be the Big Ten West champion.
I can see that, but my number 1 team is the Wisconsin Badgers. I think that when you compare him to Illinois, Wisconsin is better coached than Luke Fickell. Obviously, it's his first season, so he hasn't been able to build what Bielema has at Illinois. So I do think that that kind of offsets when it comes to the coaching matchup because, yes, Fickell's the better coach, but it's his first season, so he hasn't really been able to build his roster the way he wants it. But I think that he's really going to be able to turn the defense around, particularly in the secondary. I think Braylon Allen is a top 3-4 running back in the country. He ran for over 1,200 yards last season. I see him repeating that. And Wisconsin actually has a capable quarterback of making throws more than 15 yards, even just making throws 15 yards down the field that they lacked with Graham Mertz and Tanner Mordecai. I think Mordecai is going to have a very good season. I think that Wisconsin has some pieces on the outside that, that when you put this power run game up and you have those guys working one-on-one, especially with the play action and as creative as Luke Fickell and Phil Longo are going to be, I think that Wisconsin's going to be – they weren't a bad offense last year. I think the problem that they lacked was explosive in their offense. And I think that this year they're going to have that explosiveness factor. I think that they're going to have, 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown plays, sometimes worked in, at some point in the season, they're going to hit some of those plays. And so I think with Wisconsin already being, as good as they are, and then you add that to it, now you give them an elite head coach. And I think that Wisconsin will do very good.
Yeah. Well, the point that I will make with Illinois is this. Last year, Illinois lost to teams that they weren't supposed to lose to and beat teams they weren't supposed to beat. They beat Minnesota, they beat Iowa, they beat Wisconsin, they beat Nebraska, and they beat them all well. But you lost to Indiana, you lost to Michigan State, you lost to Purdue. Those are games that you shouldn't have lost. If you beat Michigan State and you beat Purdue, that's a top 10 matchup against Michigan in which you barely lose at the Big House. And you never know where that season could have gone. Illinois should have gone 11-1 with that season, be completely frank. They should have beaten Indiana early on in the season. They should have beaten Michigan State because there is no reason why they lost to Michigan State other than just a lack of play at the end of the game. They kind of gave that game up. And when you look at the Purdue game, it was a game that you really shouldn't have lost, but you did lose it. So I think Illinois is the best team in this division. I don't think that any of these Big Ten West teams particularly compete with the Big Ten East, even if you go to Penn State. I don't know. I would kind of put the ball – I think Illinois is going to beat Penn State, but that's because the game's at home. If it's a neutral site, I don't know. We'll see. But I think Illinois
does win the first one. That just makes it even more or less likely they win the second.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But I think, like you said, this offensive line for Illinois is going to be really, really good. The running game is going to be solid. And I just honestly think that in the trenches, Illinois is better than Wisconsin. I don't think that's a phrase I ever would have thought of saying, but I think that Illinois is a better team in the trenches than Wisconsin is, both on the offensive and defensive lines. It's not that big of a difference, but it's big enough that I think Illinois is going to be able to slow down the run game of Wisconsin and be able to have a run game of their own. So
I agree with that because Wisconsin only returned 2 starters on the offensive line, and they have a freshman starting at left guard and a sophomore with very little play time starting at right tackle. So all they return is the left tackle and the right guard. So I think that's fair to say. And you look at Jazar Newton, the defensive tackle for Illinois, who probably will be a top 10, 12 pick in the NFL draft. He's going to really cause some problems up front. And I think that's where I think that I'm a little bit worried in picking Wisconsin. But I do think that Braylon Allen's going to be able to get on the outside and run. And Illinois loses a lot of the pieces in the secondary as well. So I think that's going to hurt, and that's going to be hard to replace.
Yeah. And I think finally with this Illinois team, when you're looking at it specifically when it comes to the offensive line, you're looking at a great anchor left tackle and Julian Pearl. And I think when it comes down to it, I know you think I know you're very high on Luke Fickell, and I am too, but don't forget that Brett Bielema dominated this division for 7 years as Wisconsin's head coach. This is a guy that knows this division in and out, that knows this Wisconsin program in and out. And even though Bielema did not have much success at Arkansas because he was in over his head and he just didn't succeed, but the Big Ten West, that's kind of his stomping ground. So I think that, yeah, Bielema hasn't shown to be as good of a coach as Fickell, but I don't think the gap is as far as I think what you think it is. So,
yeah, I mean, I just think Fickell's the guy that can win at other – like he made the college football playoff for the 5 school in Cincinnati and competed with Alabama in that game. Like, I know Alabama ended up winning by, I think, like 2 touchdowns, but Cincinnati made them fight and work for that game. And honestly, if Alabama didn't outsize them so much, Cincinnati probably keeps that game within 1 score.
Oh, yeah. And to be honest, and even then, Alabama beat the crap out of, I think it was Ohio State that year they played, or was that?
No, that would have been the year they lost to Georgia, I think. Yeah, the year they lost to Georgia.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The 33-16 or something like that.
Yeah, because Michigan played Georgia that year and lost bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they played competitive, but yeah, I think Fickell is the better coach, but at the same time, I do think that it is a close matchup there. So that's going to wrap it up for today's video. As always, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and check out all 3 channels as we continue to put out these videos.